The Manchester United defensive structure isn't good enough. I know, not exactly a surprise opinion, but we've all seen it. Manchester United set up defensively off the ball and leave two bigger gaps. We covered a lot of that yesterday. United have a problem in their current structure. What is the current structure? It is a 4-4-2 shape that looks like this, and sometimes turns to more of a 4-2-4. Now it's important to make it clear here, the 4-4-2 can work for some teams, as can the 4-2-4. They are not inherently bad shapes, but it's not working for Manchester United. So what is it about the structure that isn't working currently? We'll start off with the front two. Bruno Fernandes and Xerxes are often the two players playing in this position, and their job normally is to apply pressure to the centre-backs, whilst often also marshalling a central midfielder as well. You might call this a piston press, for example. So if this player's got the ball, Bruno will go, Xerxes will cover, and then as the ball goes across, you work like that. Now the problem is this can be quite difficult to execute. For example, if teams stretch their centre-backs a little bit wider, there is instantly more ground to cover. This makes life more difficult. You've also got the problem that just literally, this is 3 players for the opposition versus just 2 for Manchester United. You don't have to be a genius to figure out United are 1 player down there, which makes life a little bit difficult. And early on in the season, and particularly against Spurs at the weekend, the front two weren't very effective. We can see the 4-4-2 shape here. Kindly zoomed out, we can see the 4-4-2. But what I really want to focus on is the front two. Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes. They are supposed to be picking up Bentancur in the midfield, in that position there. What we're going to see though, as this kind of move plays on, is that they never quite get it right. Bruno Fernandes is now applying pressure towards the ball, but his job here should also be to cut the passing lane into the midfield. That white line we've got there, Bruno Fernandes should be closer to it. He's not. You'll also notice Xerxes doesn't really get close enough to his man either, and the ball can be moved into midfield. Now eventually the ball goes out the other side, this is just a few seconds later, on the right hand side of the fence now. Now once again, you can see that white line cutting off the midfield. Bruno Fernandes should be there, stopping that pass into the centre of the park, but he doesn't do it. And also Xerxes down the bottom here, completely ineffective. He is not affecting play in the slightest. So what United are essentially doing is putting 2 players into these positions, but neither of them are really affecting the play. So in a way, United are now 2 men down. Obviously, this has a knock-on effect into the midfield. If Manchester United are pressing with 2 players that aren't really doing a lot and they're easy to bypass, you're going to have an issue in midfield. This is because Manchester United play with 2 central midfielders who now become a little bit isolated in the middle of the park. And you've got to consider that most teams from the opposition are going to have 3, if not 4 players in this area. So straight away, once again, Manchester United are outnumbered in this position. You've also got to consider that United often play with quite high wingers, as we discussed yesterday, and it leaves these central midfielders with a lot of ground to cover all over the pitch. These are the problems with Manchester United's current 4-4-2. Could it work on paper? Yes. But if you actually look at the personnel of the Manchester United midfield, it's not ideal. The front line, it's not really ideal. So in my opinion, there needs to be a change. So we need a change. The current system is not working with the personnel currently in the Manchester United team. But unfortunately, we now find ourselves in October, which means there is no opportunity, literally no chance now, of bringing a new player into the team. So the solution has to come from within the club. Therefore, if we can't change the players, we probably need to change the structure. And this is where I recommend Erik ten Hag starts. Rather than playing with a 4-2-4, or even the 4-4-2 that we have suggested in the past, it just doesn't seem to be working. I think there needs to be a shift in the midfield and a change in the front line as well. Not in terms of personnel, but in terms of player positioning. Bruno Fernandes, for me, needs to be moved deeper into a midfield position. Because what we've got at the moment, like I've said already, and like we've seen, is 2 players reasonably high up the pitch, but they're not really effective enough. They're not really stopping the ball going into these areas. So suddenly United now only have 8 behind the ball. If we've got 2 players essentially not really affecting the play that much, why not just have 1 player not affecting the play that much? Why not change the shape a little bit? Drop Bruno Fernandes deeper and move to more of a 4-1-4-1 defensive shape. Or you could call this a 4-5-1, it's up to you how you see it. I see it as a 4-1-4-1. Why would this work for United? Well, for me, it removes a lot of these hybrid pressing roles where you're sort of between players, where you're picking up 2, where there's a big focus on cutting out passing lanes, for example. I think this makes life a little bit easier. Start off with Xerxes. He is the solo striker. His job is pretty simple here. Stand between the 2 centre-backs, and the idea is to force the ball one way. So if the goalkeeper's got the ball, take up a starting position like this, and as the ball goes across, that is Xerxes' cue to curve his run and lock it onto this side of the pitch. And that is what we can now do here, really lock the play to this side. Particularly because a lot of teams in the Premier League right now build up possession with 2 in midfield, a deep double pivot. There will be one midfielder a little bit higher in the 10, but often 2 players in the midfield here. This actually makes it really easy for United to eventually lock on man-to-man. So initially, if United are zonal in these positions like this, as the ball goes one way, Xerxes locks it on. Now United can actually go literally man for man and be really aggressive with the pressing structure, because Rashford, of course, is just picking up a fullback. There's no hybrid role there. Kobbie Mainoo locks onto his midfielder. Bruno does the same. And the good thing we have here is that we still have +1 at the back. We've seen at times early on in the season that United are losing their individual battles in defensive areas on the back line. And because at times it's 1v1 like this, for example, it leaves United with no room for error. But they are making errors, so it's leading to problems. This structure actually allows us to play with an extra one. So let's say one centre-back goes tight into the striker. The other can actually provide a bit of cover. It gives United a bit of a security blanket at the back. It allows them to make a mistake because they still have the extra player. This could be quite effective for me, for Manchester United. It also allows us to be a high-pressing team without being too vulnerable at the back. You know, once the ball is this side, Garnacho can come higher. It is okay to leave a free man on the far side as long as the intensity is here. And I guess that's the next most important point. The intensity has to be there. It doesn't matter what structure we put the team into. If they are not intense, they are always going to struggle. But I think this tweak of system makes life a little bit easier for the individuals, and I think it makes the roles easier to understand. If it's on your side, you're man-to-man. If it's on the far side, you just tuck in with the rest of the team. It's a basic defensive principle. And I think when a team has clearer instructions and they know their task more clearly, they can make better decisions, or they're easier decisions. And then it is easier to apply yourself. It is easier to be intense because you know where you are directing that intensity. And that is something that United really need. I also, though, really feel that it helps in our midfield. We know that the Manchester United midfield, we discussed it yesterday, often gets dragged out wide. Currently we have 2 players trying to cover a lot of ground across the pitch. If we now put 3 in here, plus 2 slightly deeper wingers, we have much more lateral coverage. There is much more coverage across the pitch. Rather than 2 central midfielders pulling into all these wide areas like we were looking at yesterday, we now have 3 central midfielders plus the 2 wingers as well. And I think that suits what we've got in the middle. You can have Ugarte almost as that screening player who can be aggressive on the 10. But Kobbie Mainoo isn't operating in a double pivot anymore. He's to the left side of the midfield. Bruno Fernandes, not in the front 2. He's on the right side of the midfield. It allows you to pack these areas, and it makes it much more difficult to outnumber the Manchester United midfield zone. Even when United are defending deeper, there is sometimes a risk when you play this shape that players can get in the half spaces. But I think if United were to drop flat enough, but also keep the defensive line high enough, I still think you can get enough pressure on the ball whilst closing down spaces. I think that is really the key for United. Now, of course, a fix like this isn't as easy as what we have just made it look. This is all on a tactical board. We aren't taking into consideration human behaviour, human decisions and things like that. But I generally feel that if United were to make this switch, drop one player just a little bit deeper into the midfield, it gives United more coverage. Like we've said, the front press isn't really working anyway, certainly not effectively, or certainly not consistently. I don't think. United are too easily bypassed. Why not get that extra player deeper? I think it suits Kobbie Mainoo. I think it suits Ugarte more because it means he is covering small spaces, which is where I think he's excellent. Large spaces, not so good. Small spaces where he can jump from tackle to tackle, perfect. That's what you want from Ugarte. He is great in those positions. I also think, though, it allows us to bring other players into the team as well without too much of a drop-off. I think Eriksen can come into this midfield 3 and we don't lose too much. Again, because you've got 3 players there, literally, for each player, it's less ground, right? It's not too complicated. Even Casemiro could come into this role and it is less ground to cover. Mason Mount can play as part of a midfield 3. Toby Collier as well. It really opens up the options for Erik ten Hag in terms of team selection. Again, it almost builds a foundation. It makes things just a little bit simpler, a little bit easier, a little bit more black and white. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're not going to do. I think making life a bit simpler for United, ditching some of the hybrid pressing roles, getting into a solid shape as a team and working hard, I think that's the way for Erik ten Hag to improve the Manchester United defence, and I think the extra body deeper is the way to do that. But those are just my thoughts. My opinions on the matter, perhaps I am wrong. I've been wrong in the past and I will be wrong again. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you agree with this approach? Is this the way to do it? I'm not saying United have to drop off and park the bus by any means. We can still be aggressive. We can still press within this shape. But I think the extra player provides us with the support that we need. That's what I think. Let me know what you think in the comments. But apart from that, we are finished for today. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you have enjoyed it. And as always, I'll see you in the next one.